Lieutenant Sarah had always been invisible. Even now, sitting in the corner of the mess hall aboard the galactic cruiser Harmony, she might as well have been part of the furniture. The other crew members laughed and shared stories around their tables, their voices mixing with the low hum of the ship's engines, but none of them looked her way. Sarah picked at her protein ration, listening to the conversation at the nearest table. Commander Al, a towering arachnid with 8 gleaming eyes, was regaling his audience with tales of his previous missions. His chittering voice filled the air as he described battles against pirate fleets and diplomatic victories on distant worlds. The rebels never knew what hit them, Al clicked, his mandibles spreading in what passed for a smile among his species. One moment they were firing on our convoy, the next they were surrendering unconditionally. The mixed crowd of aliens nodded appreciatively. There were the blue-skinned with their crystalline hair, the massive bear-like, and a few reptilian saurians. Sarah was one of only 3 humans aboard the ship, and by far the least notable. Captain, a grizzled human veteran, sat at the head table with the senior officers. He had recruited Sarah 6 months ago, though she still wasn't entirely sure why. Her military record was clean but unremarkable. She had graduated middle of her class from the Terran Defense Academy, served 2 years on border patrol, and specialized in communications and tactical analysis. Nothing that screamed galactic peacekeeping material. The third human, Lieutenant Commander Jake Stevens, was everything Sarah wasn't. Tall, confident, with a booming laugh that could be heard across 3 decks. He regaled anyone who would listen with stories of Earth's greatest military victories, from ancient battles to the recent colonial wars. The aliens loved him. So there I was, Stevens was saying now, surrounded by 12 void wraiths, nothing but my sidearm and my wits. The table leaned in, captivated. Sarah had heard this story before. She knew it was mostly fabricated. Doctor, the ship's chief medical officer, noticed Sarah sitting alone and approached her table. The crystalline formations on her head tinkled softly as she walked. "Mind if I join you, Lieutenant?" she asked in her musical voice. Sarah gestured to the empty chair. "Of course not, Doctor." Sat down gracefully, her blue skin shimmering under the artificial lights. "You seem troubled. Are you not enjoying the stories?" "They're fine," Sarah said, taking a small bite of her ration. "I'm just not much of a storyteller myself." "Perhaps you simply haven't lived the right story yet," suggested with a gentle smile. Before Sarah could respond, the ship's alert klaxon began blaring. Red lights flashed throughout the mess hall as Captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "All hands to battle stations. We have multiple hostile contacts approaching. This is not a drill." The mess hall erupted into organized chaos as crew members rushed to their assigned positions. Sarah grabbed her tablet and headed for the communications center, her quiet footsteps lost in the thunder of running feet. The communications center was a cramped space filled with screens, consoles, and quantum relay equipment. Sarah's station was tucked into the back corner, where she monitored long-range transmissions and maintained contact with command. It wasn't glamorous work, but someone had to do it. As she powered up her systems, information began flowing across her screens. The hostile contacts were a fleet of unknown vessels, their designs unlike anything in the galactic databases. They had appeared suddenly on the edge of the system, moving in perfect formation toward a nearby civilian transport convoy. "Communications, give me a channel to the lead hostile vessel," Captain's voice came through her headset. Sarah worked quickly, cycling through frequencies until she found one that connected. "Channel open, Captain." His voice boomed across space. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain of the Galactic Peace Corps ship Harmony. You are approaching a civilian convoy in violation of interstellar law. State your intentions." The response came in a harsh, mechanical voice that made Sarah's skin crawl. "We are the Devourers. We claim this system and all within it. Surrender or be consumed." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She had heard whispers about the Devourers in intelligence briefings, but they were supposed to be a myth. Ancient machines from beyond the galactic rim, driven by an insatiable hunger to consume all biological life. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant On from the tactical station, "I'm reading 37 hostile vessels. Their energy signatures are off the charts. We're outnumbered and—" Sarah watched her screens as the tactical situation updated. The Harmony was a diplomatic vessel, lightly armed and built for peacekeeping missions. The civilian convoy they were protecting consisted of 12 transport ships carrying refugees from a recent natural disaster. There was nowhere to run. "All stations prepare for combat," ordered. "We hold this line, those transports are counting on us." Sarah's fingers flew over her keyboard as she coordinated communications between the ship's various departments. Damage control teams prepared for hull breaches, medical prepared for casualties, and engineering pushed the engines to their limits. Through it all, Sarah remained focused on her screens, processing information and relaying orders. The first salvo from the Devourer fleet lit up space like a supernova. Beams of sickly green energy lanced toward the Harmony, but the ship's shields held. Captain had positioned them between the enemy fleet and the convoy, using their larger mass to block most of the incoming fire. "Return fire," commanded. The Harmony's weapons, modest compared to a true warship, struck back. Blue pulse cannons and photon torpedoes reached out across the void, but their impact on the enemy shields seemed minimal. Sarah watched the tactical display with growing dread. The Devourer ships were advancing steadily, their formation never wavering. Several were breaking off to flank the convoy while the main force continued its assault on the Harmony. "Captain, we've got enemy vessels moving to attack the transports," On reported. "Understood, Helm, bring us about. We need to intercept those flanking units." But as the Harmony began to turn, 3 of the largest Devourer ships concentrated their fire on the cruiser's port shields. The barrier flickered and failed, and green energy beams carved deep gouges in the ship's hull. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9, came the report from damage control. "We've lost main power to the port weapon arrays." Sarah felt the ship shudder under the impact. Emergency lighting bathed the communications center in red, and she could smell the acrid smoke of burning circuits. But her equipment was still functional, still processing the flood of tactical data. That's when she saw it, a pattern in the enemy formations that everyone else had missed. The Devourer ships moved with mechanical precision, but there was something else. Subtle variations in their positioning, tiny delays in their responses to changing conditions. It looked almost like. "Captain," Sarah said into her headset, her voice barely audible over the sound of alarms. "Not now, communications. I need damage reports." Sarah's heart pounded as she watched the pattern repeat itself. She was sure now, but who would listen to her? She was just the quiet girl in the corner, the one nobody noticed. Another volley from the Devourers struck home, this time taking out the ship's primary sensor array. The main tactical display flickered and went dark. "We're flying blind," On announced. "I've lost tactical sensors." This was Sarah's moment. The realization hit her like a lightning bolt. All the senior officers were focused on the immediate crisis, shouting orders and damage reports. But she had been watching, analyzing, seeing the bigger picture that combat stress had hidden from everyone else. The Devourer fleet wasn't just attacking randomly. They were responding to the Harmony's movements with perfectly coordinated countermaneuvers. Every time Captain ordered an evasive action, the enemy ship seemed to know exactly where they were going. It was as if they could predict the future. But Sarah had spent 2 years on border patrol, watching smugglers and pirates try to evade patrol routes. She knew the difference between prediction and pattern recognition. The Devourers weren't psychic. They were using an algorithm, following a complex but ultimately predictable behavioral model based on standard Galactic Peace Corps tactical doctrine. Sarah's fingers trembled as she accessed the ship's tactical computer. If she was right, she could predict the enemy's movements just as easily as they could predict the Harmony's. But first, she had to convince someone to listen to her. "Captain," she said again, louder this time. "Communications, I told you I'm busy." The ship rocked under another impact, and Sarah watched 3 more enemy ships break formation to attack the convoy. In minutes, they would reach the defenseless transports. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She overrode the ship's communication protocols and broadcast on all channels, her voice reaching every station on the ship. "All stations, this is communications. I've identified a pattern in enemy movements. The Devourers are using predictive algorithms based on Peace Corps tactical doctrine. They know what we're going to do before we do it." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of alarms and the hum of damaged systems. Sarah could imagine Captain's expression, the shocked faces of the senior staff. She had just violated protocol in the middle of a battle, speaking directly to the entire crew without authorization. But she pressed on, her quiet voice now the only sound in the communications center. If we deviate from standard doctrine, use unconventional tactics, we can break their prediction model. Captain, I can guide us through their formation if you'll trust me. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Sarah watched her screens as the enemy ships continued their relentless advance. The flanking force was almost in range of the convoy. Finally, Captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "This is Captain. Lieutenant, you have the tactical guidance. All stations, follow communications directions until further notice." Sarah's hands were steady now, her mind clear. She had studied every major battle in human history, analyzed countless tactical scenarios during her academy training. She knew the rules of engagement by heart, which meant she also knew how to break them. "Helm, emergency stop. Full reverse thrust," she ordered, watching the tactical display on her secondary screen. "That's suicide," someone shouted over the comm. "We'll be sitting ducks." "Trust me," Sarah said, her voice carrying a confidence she had never known she possessed. "The enemy formation is designed to counter forward momentum. They're not programmed for a ship that suddenly stops and reverses." The Harmony shuddered as its engines reversed, bringing the massive ship to a near-complete stop in space. The Devourer ships, caught off guard by the unprecedented maneuver, overshot their target positions. Their perfect formation became a confused tangle as they tried to adapt to something their algorithms had never encountered. "Now helm, full speed ahead at bearing 27 Mark 4. Thread the needle between the two largest ships." "That's a gap barely wider than our hull," the helmsman protested. "They won't expect us to take it," Sarah replied. "Their formation assumes we'll try to maintain safe distances." The Harmony shot forward like a bullet, racing directly toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Green energy beams crisscrossed around them, but the Devourer ships couldn't adjust their firing solutions fast enough to track the cruiser's erratic path. Sarah watched her screens, calling out course corrections with split-second timing. "Port 15 degrees, now starboard 20, steady as she goes." The ship slipped between the two massive Devourer vessels, so close that their energy fields interfered with each other. The enemy ships, designed never to risk collision, automatically pulled apart to avoid contact. "We're through their main formation," On announced, amazement clear in his voice. "How did you know they'd react that way?" Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Because that's what I would program them to do. Self-preservation overrides aggressive tactics in any logical system." But the battle was far from over. The flanking force was still closing on the convoy, and the main enemy fleet was already reorganizing behind them. Sarah's tactics had bought them time, but not victory. "Captain, we need to reach those transports before the flanking units do," Sarah said. "But if we take a direct course, the main fleet will intercept us." "What do you suggest, Lieutenant?" Sarah studied her screens, calculating vectors and timing. The answer came to her with crystal clarity, a solution so audacious that no algorithm would ever predict it. "We're going to use their own ships as cover. Helm, plot a course that keeps us in the sensor shadow of the largest Devourer vessel. Match their speed and heading." For the next 10 minutes, the Harmony played the most dangerous game of hide-and-seek in galactic history. Sarah guided them through the enemy formation, using the Devourer's own ships to block targeting sensors and weapons fire. Every time an enemy vessel tried to get a clear shot, she found another piece of cover. The crew worked with mechanical precision, following her orders without question. The quiet girl they had all overlooked was now the voice of their salvation, her tactical genius the only thing standing between them and annihilation. They reached the convoy just as the Devourer flanking force opened fire on the first transport. The Harmony emerged from behind an enemy cruiser like an avenging angel, its weapons blazing. Caught completely by surprise, two of the flanking vessels were destroyed before they could react. "All transports, this is the Harmony," Captain broadcast. "Execute emergency jump procedures. We'll hold them off." Sarah watched as the civilian ships began charging their faster-than-light drives. It would take precious minutes for them to escape, minutes the Harmony would have to buy with blood and steel. The remaining enemy ships converged on their position, abandoning their algorithmic formations in favor of overwhelming firepower. But Sarah had one more trick up her sleeve. a desperate gambit that would either save them all or doom them to a glorious death. "Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, "I need you to trust me one more time." The transport ships vanished into hyperspace one by one, their emergency jumps creating brilliant flashes of light against the star field. Sarah counted each departure on her screen, her heart racing as the Devourer fleet closed in around the Harmony. 27 enemy ships now surrounded them in a perfect sphere, their weapons charged and ready. "All transports have jumped to safety," reported the sensor operator, his voice tight with relief and terror. "Good," Captain said grimly. "At least we saved them. All hands prepare for our final stand." But Sarah wasn't ready to accept defeat. Her mind raced as she studied the enemy formation, looking for any weakness, any flaw in their positioning. The Devourers had learned from her earlier tactics, abandoning their predictable algorithms in favor of a simple, overwhelming assault. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The enemy ships weren't just surrounding them randomly. They were maintaining precise distances from each other, their formation creating a perfect three-dimensional grid. It was elegant, efficient, and absolutely deadly. It was also exactly what she needed. "Captain, I need you to order all hands to emergency stations and seal all blast doors. What I'm about to attempt will either save us or destroy us instantly." His voice was steady despite the impossible situation. "What are you planning, Lieutenant?" Sarah's fingers flew over her console, accessing systems she had only read about in technical manuals. "I'm going to turn their perfect formation against them, but I need complete control of the ship's power grid and propulsion systems." "Engineering, transfer all system controls to communications," ordered without hesitation. The chief engineer's voice crackled through the comm. "Sir, that's highly irregular. Lieutenant isn't qualified to." "Do it now," barked. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward the captain. He was trusting her completely, betting the lives of his crew on the tactical insights of a junior officer who had spent most of her career being invisible. New controls appeared on Sarah's screen as the ship's systems came under her command. She could see everything now: power distribution, engine output, weapon charging rates, even the life support systems. The Harmony was hers to control. "All stations prepare for emergency deceleration in 3, 2, 1, mark." The ship shuddered to a complete stop, its engines revering thrust so violently that the artificial gravity struggled to compensate. Every person aboard was thrown against their restraints as the massive vessel fought against its own momentum. The Devourer ships, programmed to maintain their formation while attacking, suddenly found themselves overshooting their target. But instead of dispersing, they tried to maintain their perfect grid pattern, their formation contracting around the now stationary Harmony. That was exactly what Sarah had been counting on. "Weapons, target the ship directly above us with everything we have. Full power to forward shields and prepare for impact." "Impact?" On's voice cracked with confusion. "Lieutenant, what are you?" "Trust me," Sarah shouted, her quiet demeanor finally cracking under the pressure. "Fire now." The Harmony's weapons lanced upward, concentrating every ounce of firepower on the Devourer ship positioned directly above them. The enemy vessel's shields flared and collapsed under the unexpected assault, and the follow-up barrage tore through its hull like paper. But Sarah wasn't trying to destroy it completely. As the crippled ship began to fall toward them, she engaged the Harmony's engines at maximum thrust, accelerating directly upward. "You're going to ram them," someone screamed over the comm. "Not ram," Sarah said, her voice once again calm and controlled. "Catch." The damaged Devourer ship struck the Harmony's forward shields in a shower of sparks and debris. But instead of punching through, the alien vessel was caught in the cruiser's deflector field, held in place by the same technology that normally protected them from micrometeorites. Now the Harmony had a massive shield of twisted metal and advanced alien technology protecting its forward arc. More importantly, Sarah had just demonstrated something that would change the course of the battle entirely. "All enemy ships, this is Lieutenant Sarah of the Galactic Peace Corps," she broadcast on all frequencies, her voice carrying across space to every Devourer vessel in the system. "You've made a critical error in your tactical programming." The response came immediately, that same harsh mechanical voice from before. Explain your meaning, biological. Sarah smiled grimly as she maneuvered the Harmony through the enemy formation, using the captured ship as both shield and battering ram. You assume that biologicals are inferior to machines because we're unpredictable, emotional, illogical. But you've missed the most important thing about humans. She fired the ship's engines again, spinning the captured Devourer vessel like a massive flail. Two more enemy ships were caught in its path, their hulls cracking under the impact. We don't just think outside the box, Sarah continued, her voice broadcast to every ship in both fleets. We don't even acknowledge that the box exists. The Devourer fleet began to scatter, their perfect formation dissolving as they tried to avoid the Harmony's unorthodox attacks. But Sarah wasn't finished. She had studied their movement patterns, analyzed their response times, and found the fundamental flaw in their design. They were too perfect. Computer, analyze enemy formation dispersal patterns and predict optimal intercept vectors, she commanded the ship's tactical computer. Data flowed across her screens as the AI processed thousands of variables in seconds. The Devourers were scattering, but they were doing it according to predetermined protocols. Even in chaos, they followed rules. Rules that Sarah could exploit. Helm new course, bearing 187 Mark 12. Engineering, prepare to jettison our captured prize on my mark. The Harmony accelerated toward the largest group of fleeing Devourer ships, still carrying the twisted wreckage of their fallen comrade. At precisely the right moment, Sarah released the magnetic clamps holding the debris. The destroyed ship, still traveling at tremendous velocity, slammed into three more Devourer vessels. But that wasn't the real purpose of the maneuver. While the enemy ships were distracted by the debris field, Sarah had positioned the Harmony exactly where she needed it. Now weapons, target the lead ship's primary reactor housing, single photon torpedo. The torpedo streaked across space, striking the enemy vessel's power core with surgical precision. The explosion was magnificent, a chain reaction that tore through the ship's hull and sent massive chunks of debris flying in all directions. More importantly, the explosion created exactly the kind of interference Sarah had been hoping for. Electromagnetic pulses, radiation bursts, and debris clouds combined to create a sensor-dead zone that would last for several minutes. All remaining enemy vessels, Sarah broadcast again, you now have a choice. You can continue this battle and face the same fate as your comrades, or you can withdraw and reconsider your assumptions about biological life forms. The response was swift and unanimous. The surviving Devourer ships, their formations broken and their tactical algorithms useless against such unconventional warfare, began to retreat toward the edge of the system. But Sarah wasn't about to let them escape, without leaving them with something to think about. Before you go, she called after them, let me leave you with one final demonstration of human tactical doctrine. She triggered a pre-recorded message that began broadcasting on all frequencies, a detailed analysis of everything the Devourers had done wrong during the engagement. Her voice, calm and professional, dissected their tactics with surgical precision. Your primary error was assuming that superior technology equals superior strategy. You programmed your ships to respond to known tactical patterns, but you failed to account for innovation. Human military doctrine is based on a single principle. When the enemy expects you to zig, you zag. The message continued as the Devourer fleet limped away, broadcasting tactical lessons that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. Sarah had not only defeated a superior enemy force, she had taught them why they lost. As the last enemy ship vanished into hyperspace, the bridge of the Harmony erupted in cheers. Crew members who had never spoken to Sarah before were calling her name, praising her tactical genius, declaring her a hero. But Sarah barely heard them. She was already thinking about the implications of what had just happened. The galaxy had been introduced to a new kind of warfare, a style of combat that threw out conventional wisdom in favor of pure creativity. Every military computer in known space would need to account for what they had just witnessed. Captain's voice cut through the celebration. Lieutenant, report to the bridge immediately. Sarah made her way through corridors filled with cheering crew members, each of them looking at her with new respect. The invisible girl had become the savior of the ship, the tactical genius who had outthought a fleet of artificial intelligences. When she stepped onto the bridge, She found the entire senior staff waiting for her. Captain stood at the center, his weathered face showing a mixture of pride, amazement, and something else Sarah couldn't quite identify. "Lieutenant," he began formally, "what you accomplished today was nothing short of miraculous. You saved this ship, the convoy, and possibly changed the course of galactic warfare forever." Sarah stood at attention, unsure of what to say. She had simply done what needed to be done, used the skills she had learned and the insights she had gained through years of quiet observation. "However," continued, "we have a problem." Sarah's heart sank. Had she violated too many protocols, exceeded her authority beyond forgiveness? She had acted on instinct, making decisions that should have been reserved for senior officers. "The problem," said with a slight smile, "is that word of your tactics is already spreading throughout the Peace Corps fleet. Every ship captain in the galaxy is going to want you as their tactical officer. And frankly, Lieutenant, you're too good to waste on a diplomatic cruiser like the Harmony." Doctor stepped forward, her crystalline hair chiming softly. "What the captain is trying to say, Sarah, is that you're about to become the most famous human in the galaxy." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Fame was the last thing she wanted. She had spent her entire life being invisible, finding comfort in the shadows where she could observe and think without interference. "Captain," she said quietly, "I just want to serve where I'm needed. I don't want fame or recognition." Nodded understanding in his eyes. "I know, Lieutenant, that's what makes you so remarkable, but I'm afraid the choice is no longer yours to make." He gestured toward the main screen, where incoming transmission requests were scrolling past faster than the computer could process them. News organizations, military commands, diplomatic corps, research institutions, everyone wanted to interview the quiet girl who had redefined modern warfare. "The galaxy wants to know your story," Sarah said. "They want to understand how someone they've never heard of managed to defeat a fleet that had terrorized the outer systems for months." Sarah looked at the flood of transmission requests and felt overwhelmed. She had never been the center of attention, never wanted to be. The thought of cameras, interviews, and public scrutiny made her stomach churn. But as she watched the data streaming across the screen, she realized something important. This wasn't about her anymore. The tactics she had used, the principles she had demonstrated, could save countless lives in future conflicts. If sharing her story could help other officers think outside conventional parameters, then perhaps the attention would be worth it. "Captain," she said finally, "I'll do whatever is necessary to serve the peace, but I have one request." "Name it." "I want to make sure that what happened today doesn't become about one person being special. It should be about all of us being capable of more than anyone expects." Sarah paused, looking around at the faces of her. "Everyone on this ship contributed to our victory. I just happened to be the one who saw the pattern first." Smiled broadly. "Lieutenant, I think you're going to handle fame much better than you think." As if summoned by their conversation, the communications console began chiming with priority transmissions. Sarah recognized the codes immediately. Galactic Command, the Peace Corps General Staff, and the Terran Defense Ministry all wanted immediate debriefs. "It looks like our quiet time is over," Sarah said wryly. But even as she prepared to face the storm of attention that was about to descend upon her, Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction she had never experienced before. For the first time in her life, being invisible had been exactly the right preparation for being seen. She had learned to observe, to think, to understand patterns that others missed. Now the galaxy would learn what humans could accomplish when they stopped playing by everyone else's rules. 3 months after the battle that would become known as the Harmony Incident, Sarah stood before the Galactic Council in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the massive amphitheater, their varied forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes that stretched up into the shadows above. She wore her new uniform, the gold stripes of a full commander marking her rapid promotion through the ranks. The quiet lieutenant who had once sat alone in mess halls across the galaxy was now one of the most recognized figures in known space. But recognition had come with complications she had never anticipated. The ambassador, a tall reptilian being with scales that shifted color with his emotions, rose from his seat in the second tier. "The council recognizes ambassador of the hegemony." Scales flashed angry red as he spoke. "Esteemed colleagues, We gather today to address a grave threat to galactic stability. The human tactical innovations demonstrated in the recent conflict with the Devourer fleet represent a dangerous escalation in military capability. Sarah remained perfectly still as the ambassador continued his speech, though inside she felt the familiar weight of being examined and judged. Only now, instead of being invisible, she was the focus of galactic attention. The humans have proven that they can defeat technologically superior forces through sheer unpredictability, continued. This makes them an element that threatens the established order. How can any species feel secure knowing that humanity can rewrite the rules of warfare at will? Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Sarah could see the concern on alien faces throughout the chamber. The footage of the Harmony's battle had been analyzed by military experts across the galaxy, and the conclusions had been unsettling for many species. Humans didn't think like other races. They didn't follow established patterns or predictable protocols. In a galaxy that had spent developing careful balances of power, humanity represented chaos. Chancellor N, the elderly who presided over the council, gestured for silence. Commander, you may respond to these concerns. Sarah stepped forward to the speaker's podium, her footsteps echoing in the vast chamber. For a moment, she was that quiet girl again, overwhelmed by the attention of hundreds of powerful beings. Then she remembered why she was here. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. I understand your concerns about human tactical unpredictability, but I think you're focusing on the wrong issue. She activated the holographic display system, filling the air above the council floor with tactical diagrams from the Harmony engagement. What happened in our battle with the Devourers wasn't about humans being chaotic or unpredictable. It was about recognizing patterns that others had missed and being willing to act on incomplete information. The display showed the movement patterns of both fleets, with trajectory lines and timing data overlaid in brilliant colors. Every species in this chamber has military doctrines based on logical analysis and proven tactics. These doctrines work because they're predictable to your allies and create consistent results. But they also work for your enemies, who can study your patterns and develop countermeasures. Sarah manipulated the display, highlighting specific moments in the battle where conventional tactics would have led to disaster. Humans don't abandon logic. We simply refuse to be bound by the assumption that there's only one logical solution to any problem. When faced with an impossible situation, we look for possibilities that others haven't considered. Ambassador, as of the collective, stood, her crystalline hair chiming softly. Commander, while your tactical innovations were indeed remarkable, they raise questions about the stability of future conflicts. If every species begins adopting unpredictable tactics, warfare could become chaotic beyond any control. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. It was a valid concern, one that she had been wrestling with since the battle. With respect, Ambassador, warfare is already chaotic. The Devourers proved that conventional tactics, no matter how sophisticated, can be countered by sufficiently advanced analysis. The galaxy needs new approaches to defense, not because humans are special, but because the threats we face are evolving. She changed the display to show intelligence reports from the Outer Rim, data that most council members had never seen. The Devourer fleet we encountered was just a scouting force. Long-range sensors have detected massive gatherings of similar ships beyond our current borders. They're studying our tactics, learning our patterns, preparing for a full invasion. The chamber fell silent as delegates absorbed this information. The implications were staggering. Traditional military doctrine assumes that your enemy thinks like you do, Sarah continued. The Devourers don't think at all. They compute. They analyze. They optimize. The only way to defeat an enemy that can perfectly predict logical behavior is to behave illogically. She paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of faces focused on her words. But there's something else you need to understand about human tactical thinking. It's not just about being unpredictable. It's about adaptation, innovation, and the willingness to sacrifice established advantages for unexpected opportunities. Sarah activated a new section of the display, showing battle simulations that had been run by various military academies across the galaxy. In the 3 months since the Harmony engagement, military analysts from dozens of species have attempted to replicate our tactics. Most have failed, not because they can't understand what we did, but because they can't bring themselves to make the same choices. The simulation showed various alien crews attempting to ram their ships into enemy vessels, use debris as weapons, or violate basic safety protocols for tactical advantage. In almost every case, the alien commanders hesitated at crucial moments, unable to commit to actions that seemed reckless or dangerous. Humans have a saying, "Fortune favors the bold," but it's more than just boldness. It's the ability to make decisions with incomplete information and accept the consequences. Most species prefer to analyze until they're certain of success. Humans prefer to act while action is still possible. Commander Al, Sarah's former shipmate from the Harmony, stood in the gallery reserved for witnesses. His chittering voice carried clearly through the chamber. "If I may address the council," he said formally. "I served with Commander during the engagement in question. I can confirm that her actions were not reckless or chaotic. They were the result of careful observation and analysis, combined with a willingness to attempt solutions that others would consider impossible." He gestured towards Sarah with one of his multiple arms. "The commander spent months watching, learning, understanding patterns that the rest of us had accepted as normal. When crisis struck, she didn't panic or abandon reason. She simply applied her observations in ways that no algorithm could predict." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude toward her former. Al had always been kind to her, one of the few officers who had noticed the quiet human in the corner. "Thank you, Commander Al," she said. "That raises an important point about human tactical thinking. We don't develop our strategies in isolation. We observe, we learn from others, we adapt their techniques to our own needs." She modified the display again, showing the tactical contributions of various species throughout galactic history. The maneuver that broke the Devourer formation was inspired by crystal singing patterns. The debris field tactic came from studying hunting strategies. The sensor jamming technique was based on research into stellar phenomena. The delegates began murmuring among themselves as they recognized their own cultural contributions to human tactical thinking. "Humans don't just think outside the box," Sarah continued. "We collect boxes from everyone we meet, take them apart, and build something new from the pieces. Our unpredictability comes from our diversity of experience, not from any inherent chaos in our nature." Chancellor N leaned forward in his ceremonial chair. "Commander, your explanation is enlightening, but it raises a new question. If human tactical innovation is based on adapting techniques from other species, what happens when those other species stop sharing their knowledge?" Sarah had been expecting this question. It went to the heart of the fear that many delegates harbored about human military capabilities. "Chancellor, that would be a tragedy for everyone involved. Human innovation depends on cultural exchange and mutual learning. If the galaxy becomes a collection of isolated species guarding their secrets, then everyone becomes more vulnerable to external threats." She gestured toward the outer rim data still displayed in the hologram. "The Devourers represent just one type of threat that requires innovative responses. There are others out there, threats that we haven't even identified yet. The galaxy's best defense isn't any single species becoming more powerful. It's all species working together, sharing knowledge, and developing new solutions to unprecedented challenges." The debate continued for hours, with delegates raising concerns about weapons proliferation, tactical stability, and the potential for human innovations to disrupt existing power balances. Through it all, Sarah answered questions with patience and honesty, never claiming that humans were superior, only that they approached problems differently. As the formal session drew to a close, Chancellor N called for a recess to allow the delegates to consult with their home governments. Sarah knew that the real decisions would be made in private meetings and closed-door negotiations over the next few days. But she had accomplished what she came to do. The galaxy now understood that human tactical innovations weren't a threat to be contained, but a resource to be shared and adapted. Doctor approached her as the chamber began to empty. "That was remarkably well done, Sarah. You've given them a great deal to consider." Sarah smiled, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. "I just hope they reach the right conclusions. The galaxy is going to need every advantage it can get in the coming years." "Speaking of which," said, her blue skin shimmering with amusement, "I have a message for you from Captain." She handed Sarah a data tablet containing a priority transmission from the Harmony. Sarah's former captain appeared on the screen, his weathered face breaking into a familiar grin. Sarah, I hope your diplomatic mission is going well. I wanted to let you know that your tactical innovations have been officially adopted by the Peace Corps fleet. Every ship is now equipped with what they're calling protocol guidelines for unconventional warfare. Sarah felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment at having military tactics named after her. More importantly, continued, we've received word that several species are requesting joint training exercises with human crews. It seems everyone wants to learn how to think outside the box, as you put it. The message concluded with personal recommendation that Sarah accept the position of Director of Tactical Innovation at the Galactic Military Academy. It was a posting that would put her at the center of military development for the entire galaxy. As Sarah considered her options, she realized how far she had come from the quiet girl who sat alone in mess halls. The invisible observer had become a leader, a teacher, and an architect of galactic defense strategy. But at her core, she was still the same person who preferred watching to talking, thinking to acting rashly, and finding patterns that others missed. Those qualities hadn't changed. They had simply found their proper application. The galaxy had learned something important about humans in the months since the Harmony incident. They had discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their physical capabilities. It was their ability to look at any situation and ask the question that no one else had thought to ask. What if we tried something completely different? As she walked through the corridors of the council complex, Sarah reflected on the irony of her situation. She had spent her entire career being overlooked, dismissed as unremarkable by those around her. Now she was being hailed as a tactical genius and revolutionary military thinker. The truth, as she understood it, was much simpler. She hadn't become something different. She had simply found a situation where being herself was exactly what the galaxy needed. In a universe full of species that followed rules, protocols, and established patterns, sometimes the most valuable person was the one who didn't even acknowledge that such limitations existed. The quiet girl in the corner had been watching, learning, and preparing for the moment when observation would become action. Now, as she prepared to shape the military future of hundreds of worlds, Sarah carried with her the lessons of invisibility, the importance of watching before acting, thinking before speaking, and understanding that the most powerful weapon in any conflict is the willingness to see possibilities that others have missed. The galaxy would never be the same. But then again, Sarah thought with a quiet smile that had always been the human way. When faced with the impossible, they had never been content to accept that it couldn't be done. They simply found a different way to do it. And in a universe full of artificial intelligences that could predict every logical response, being illogical had become the ultimate logic. The quiet girl had taught the galaxy that sometimes the best way to solve an impossible problem was to prove that it was never impossible in the first place. The footage of her battle would be studied for generations, but Sarah knew that the real lesson wasn't in the specific tactics she had used. It was in the mindset that had made those tactics possible, the uniquely human ability to look at any situation and refuse to accept that there was only one way to approach it. In the end, that might be humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization. Not their weapons or their technology, but their stubborn insistence that there was always another way, always another possibility, always another chance to turn defeat into victory. The galaxy had been looking for a hero to save them from impossible odds. Instead, they had found something much more valuable, a teacher who could show them how to save themselves.